Guys, what is going on? It's Joe with Odyssey Off-Road. Thanks for tuning into another video. If I was said that this one was kind of a long-awaited video, I'd be lying. Even though I've only had this Scrambler for a month, man, I've dreamed of having the two of these machines side by side and comparing them since they came out. There's very few videos out there that do this and have compared the two side by side together extensively, and we're going to be doing that here on this channel. This is kind of going to be part one of comparing these two machines. We're going to walk around the both of them today. We're going to compare specs. We're going to show you different aspects of each machine, and then in future videos we'll take them out on the trail, demonstrate them in different conditions, kind of drag race them, which there's some of that already out there, some drag races on the two of these, and take them through some rough terrain, hill climbs, jumps, stuff like that, and show you the true difference between these two machines. And I will tell you, from owning the both of them now and having them both out on the trail, they are very, very different, and yet they are very, very similar in some ways. And we'll get into all that. Hopefully this video here and future videos will help you guys kind of decide if you're deciding now which one you want. We'll talk about all the different things here today, and hopefully that'll help you make your purchase decision. It's a lot of money for both of these machines, and the last thing you want to do is spend the money and regret your purchase. A little background here: I have come from that position. If you guys follow the channel for a while, you'll know we started out. I purchased a Canam Renegade 1000 XXC. I was in the market when I first got in the market to add a 4x4 machine to the fleet. It was between these two. I didn't know which one to get. I talked to people. I watched reviews on each one, but there was really nothing out there at the time comparing the two together, or somebody that owned them both and rode them back to back. It was really difficult to decide, and I ended up going with the Canam because it was cheaper. And my brother had a Canam Renegade at the time. I had driven it before. My wife had a Canam Renegade 570 at the time, and so I knew the machine, and so I felt comfortable at least making a purchase, knowing what I was getting, where the Scrambler was really an unknown. I had never even seen one in person. I never sat on one, never driven one for sure. So made the purchase, bought a Canam Renegade 1000. Shortly after, I kind of regretted the purchase in some ways, because it wasn't what I particularly wanted. It's a great machine, but for what I wanted to do with it, and for the purpose I wanted it to fill, for me, didn't fit the bill. And that's simply because it's not my only ATV. I have two ATVs. Personally, I have a Raptor 700R 2020 model, and then I wanted to add a 4x4 to do different types of riding. So I ended up getting rid of my Renegade. I ended up with a Grizzly for a short period of time. Grizzly 700 Special Edition. I had that. It was a great machine. But ultimately settled on this Scrambler 1000 here, and I will tell you, in the 1 month I've owned this thing, I'm extremely happy with the purchase. I cannot say enough good things about it. So with that being said, let's get into comparing the two and let you guys make your own decision. I'll give you as much information as possible to help you make that decision. So hopefully this is helpful. So let's get started. All right, guys. So I guess the first thing we'll talk about is the biggest question. The biggest difference between these two machines is price. Now, the Renegade here, this is a 2022 model. If you're looking at to get a 2024 1000 XXC, which is what this is here, is going to run you, MSRP is $15,949. That's before shipping and freight and crate and prep and all that stuff. MSRP on the Scrambler is $17,999. So you're talking approximately $2,000 difference between the two. So that's the first thing you're going to want to consider. Do you get $2,000? Is this machine $2,000 better than this machine? Or does it just come down to what you really want out of the machine? So let's talk about the history of these two, because Polaris and Can-Am really have been going at it in the side-by-side wars for years now, right? Everybody knows that, Can-Am comes out with a high horsepower machine, and then Polaris one-ups them, and then Can-Am comes out with another one, and it's a back and forth. Who's got the biggest, baddest machines? And it was the same thing with the ATVs for a while, and still is, to this day, really. Back before Polaris came out with this S model Scrambler, you had the XP 1000, which was the same width, 55 inches wide, and they were much more comparable machines. 55 inches wide, similar horsepower, 89 to 91, and Dirt Tracks did a great shootout on those machines, and determined, in their estimation, that the Can-Am at the time was the better machine for a multitude of reasons. I suggest you go check out that video if you're considering, an older XP 1000 Scrambler. This is really the new S model versus the best from Polaris currently to the best from Can-Am currently. That's what we're comparing here. So now 2020 comes, Polaris introduces the S model. 55-inch wide monster. I mean, the thing is like literally a monster truck. That's what it feels like driving it. And I say that, but yet it also feels super nimble. And we'll get into that, in comparing the two. So now, is Can-Am going to answer Polaris and make a wider, more longer travel Can-Am Renegade to compete against that machine? I think if they were smart, they would. They got about $2,000 to play with, so they could come out with technically a wider Can-Am, market it the same MSRP as the Scrambler, and you'd have an insane head-to-head ATV battle between the two. I think Can-Am should do it. You guys comment below if you think so too. I think that would be awesome to see. So it'd be nice to see some more ATVs and, more innovation going into ATVs rather than just the side-by-sides. I think it's great. That's one thing that's great that Polaris did with these, is they did, kind of go outside the box and come out with something crazy in the ATV world, as opposed to just the side-by-sides, which most of the companies are doing now. So let's get into some more specs. We mentioned the size, right? So this S model is, now I'm going by my measurements. I measured it myself with a measuring tape with 56 inches wide. They advertise it as 55. It actually measures, if you measure the sidewall to sidewall, it's about 56 inches. The Renegade is a little bit different. It depends on where you're measuring it. So the Renegade measures 46 inches outside front tire to outside rear tire. If you're measuring front tire, rather, outside of front tire, 46 inches and 56 inches. So that's 10 inches difference. That's pretty extreme difference in width. And you feel that when you're riding it, I will tell you. The rear of the Renegade is a little wider than the front because you have a different offset wheel. If you measure the rear, you're looking closer to 48 inches wide with the fatter tires in the back. And you feel that in handling, and I'll get into that also. So some more specs here. The Can-Am Renegade has 91 horsepower. You Scrambler has 89 horsepower. Ground clearance. You got 14.5 inches of ground clearance. They advertise 14.5 inches of ground clearance. I will tell you, I measure it. It's about 14 to 14.25, depending on how it's sitting. I have the suspension preload at factory specs, and the same thing with the Renegade. Renegade advertises at 10.5 inches. I would tell you it's sitting under 10 inches right now with the Can-Am skid plate on it and about 560 miles on it. So it's approximately 10 inches. So quite a difference in ground clearance. I mean, you can see it visibly. You can see visibly the size difference, the width. Some of that ground clearance comes from the tires. So you have 27 by 9 tires on the Scrambler, front and rear, so you can rotate the tires. Same offset wheels on a 12-inch rim. And then you have 14-inch rim here on the Can-Am, but they're 25-inch tires. So you get a 25 by, I believe it's an 8 in the front. And yeah, you got a 25 by 8 in the front. And then the rear The rear is a 25 by 11 tire. And I will tell you what that does is they're advertised as 25 inches tall, but that rear tire actually sits taller than the front tire. And you feel all these things when you drive in the machine. This is exactly why I like the tire setup better on the Scrambler. It's the same size tires, front and rear. And, anybody that races these Renegades in the GNCC circuit and the woods racing, they ditch this offset wheel setup and they go with a square tire setup like the Scrambler has, and they run a 26 by 9 or 27 by 9 front and rear because it just handles better. It corners better. Makes it for a much more sportier handling feel. And you see, so with the Scrambler having that from the factory, that's a one-up for the Scrambler in my opinion. Not only is it handled better that way, and you have more sidewall on the tire with the 12-inch wheel and the 27-inch tire, which soaks up the small chop and the bumps. But you can also rotate the tires, and you get way more longevity out of the tires, same way you would on your automobile. So that's nice. You can see these whole shots have about 500 and something miles on them. Not really a lot of road use, but they are chewed up quite a bit. They're really chewed up. There's some chunks missing out of them. They're wearing fairly fast. They're not that tall a lug from the factory, so we're gonna definitely change. That's something we're gonna change up on there for sure. Both good-looking machines, but there's, as you can see, there's some drastic differences between the two. So moving on to weight, that's another big one. Weight of these machines now, I don't know why they don't give you the wet weight. Wet meaning a full tank of fuel, oil in the engine, antifreeze in the, coolant in the radiator, stuff like, full of fluids. Dry weight advertised is 795 pounds for the Renegade. So just about 800 pounds, 795 pounds for the Renegade, and 881 pounds for the Scrambler. So Scrambler is 90 pounds heavier, dry, with no fluids in it, than the Renegade is. When you fill them both up with fluids, you're still probably about 90-pound difference. They both have about the same, both have 5.5-gallon fuel tanks. Use about the same amount of oil and fluids in the tranny and differentials. So that stuff is not really changing anything. You're still going to have about a 90-pound difference between the two machines. Both of them, you're pushing almost 1,000 pounds of ATV. So that's something to consider also. You get to an accident, one of these machines roll over on you, you're going to be in a hurting because you ain't getting this thing off by yourself, most likely. We are probably going to install some winches on ours because we've already been in a situation where it was close call, and my wife had a near rollover where the machine was kind of just tipped over on her and she held it up, but it was hard. It was difficult getting it off of her with the angle, with the way it was on the ground and the angle it was on a hill, and but we did get it off, and so we're gonna be investing in some winches because you get to a situation like that, you're out there one or two people. It's hard to roll one of these machines over. So other things to consider is if you're going to use these machines for any type of work. Now, these machines aren't built for work, but you can do some work with them. They both have, well, I shouldn't say both. Both of mine have rear racks. And the only reason that is because my wife added one in the back of hers. This is a Rough Country makes this. The Renegade comes with absolutely nothing back here but that rubber pad and a couple plastic hooks where the bolts are. So Rough Country makes a rack. You take it off, you bolt this down, and then you can strap down a cooler or a tool bag, whatever you want to take out with you, because there's no storage anywhere on the Renegade. There's not even a cubby to put a pair of gloves. There's absolutely nothing, which I think is a big miss from Can-Am. I know it's a sport machine, but it's still a 4x4 machine. People take these on long trail rides. That's what they a lot of times get them for. They're not taking them out on the track, where they're close by their vehicle in a lot of circumstances. They're taking them out on long trail rides. That's what we do with them. That's why we got these 4x4 machines, for long, adventurous rides, 100-mile rides in a day. And you want to take some stuff with you. You want to pack a lunch. You want to take have drinks with you. You want to take an extra pair of gloves, maybe goggles, a light jacket. You know, instead of wearing a backpack, you could throw a little bag on the rack, strap it down, and you know, be free and nimble. Now, I wear a backpack when I'm on my Raptor and stuff, and this Scrambler comes with a rack. So they make a bag that's just lock and ride system, goes right in here. You lock it down. It's about $181. It's like a hard bag, and you can store all kinds of stuff in it. So it's about yay high, you know, and you can take it on and off real easy if you just, you know, if you're not needing to use it, you can just two little latches, pops right off in 3 seconds, and you have it with no bag on it. With the Scrambler, you do get a little bit of storage. It's really not much. In all honesty, you get this little cubby back here. I have the factory toolkit back there, and then my registration and insurance paperwork to carry with me, and you know, whatever permits I need for where I'm riding. If I need to carry permits, I can keep them in there as well. So that's about it. It's a little bit of storage, not much. You have the rear rack on the Scrambler. You got a front rack space on the Scrambler also with these here. You can put stuff on there. It holds about 25, 30 pounds, they say. You have nothing on the front of the Renegade, as you can see. So as far as lengthwise, if you want to load a couple of these, say, in a trailer, they're both the same. They both measure. I measured them front to rear with a tape measure prior to making this video. And they are both about 89 inches nose to tail. So when I say nose to tail, I mean the furthest point sticking out in the front to the furthest point in the rear. So on the Renegade, that would be your edge of your front bumper to the edge of the rear bumper. It's about 89 inches. And then on the Scrambler, the difference with the Scrambler is, so you got the edge of the rear grab bar. The front edge, though, would be the edge of the front tire. So you can see the Scrambler, the bumper comes into play after the tires. So the tires are the first point they're going to hit. That's another win for the Polaris. Because if you're out there on a trail, you know, you have these big 4x4 machines, you're using them typically on a rougher terrain than you would, say, a sport quad, something like that. You're on a long adventurous trail ride, going over rough terrain, obstacles, rock ledges. If you're coming up on something, the first thing that's going to hit on the Scrambler, I should say the Renegade, is going to be the front bumper and front skid plate before the tires. You have these small tires on there, and the bumper sticks out before the tires. That's, you know, that's a win for the Scrambler. You have these big monster tires that hit whatever obstacle first before your bumper comes anywhere near it. I mean, you can see the approach angle difference there, as opposed to the Renegade. So about 89 inches front to back. Now, could you know, if you loaded them nose to tail, you know, so let's say you had a Renegade and a Scrambler like I do, nose of the front bumper there is probably going to sit, you know, tuck in under there. Your tires will kind of come close. You're not going to use a full 89 and 89 inches back to back. You're going to cut a couple inches out of that. If you have two Scramblers, though, you know, front tires are going to hit the rear tires. Figure double in that 89 inches. That's what kind of trail length you're going to need for if you're owning two machines. If we get into suspension and drivability, let's talk about that for a minute. They both come with premium shocks. You have Walker Evans shocks here on the Scrambler 1000S, and you have Fox shocks on the Canam Renegade. Both shocks considered premium on the market. Fully adjustable, rebound. So you can adjust your rebound. High speed and low speed compression here on the Fox shocks, all four for the Renegade, and the same thing here with the Scrambler 1000. You have the Walker Evans. High speed is the red knob, and low speed is the black knob, and then you have your rebound. The difference with the Scrambler. And you know, I'm not trying to sound like I'm favoring the Scrambler here, but it just kind of, there will be some things that I will point out that the Renegade is better at. But again, a little bit more versatility here on the Scrambler. You have dual rate springs. You have a single spring here on the Renegade, and you have dual rate springs on the Scrambler with the divider. You do, and this is a true dual rate setup because you have the crossover rings, so that when the two, when this divider eventually hits the crossover ring, it will just transfer all of the weight to the rear spring, and you'll just be riding primarily on that. It really comes into play depending on how you have your crossover set up. I have them set up to factory specs. After about half the suspension travel, I would say this slider hits that crossover ring, and then so for the big hits, it's gonna give you a little bit more bottoming out resistance. Where over here on the Renegade, you have one progressive rate spring that you'll see has tighter coils on the top, and then they're a little wider on the bottom. So that spring is basically progressively going to get stiffer the more further it goes into the compression stroke, and that's the way that would work. So totally different philosophies. Really depends on what you like. I will tell you, from riding both machines back to back, we went out this past Sunday. My wife on her Renegade, that's my wife's Renegade, if you don't know that already. You can tell by all the pink. And I've had there's some videos out on the channel about, what we did to that machine. And she's got a video out actually doing some work on the machine herself. So riding back to back, kind of switched. I hopped off mine, hopped on hers, and vice versa, and she got on mine, and we drove for a few miles each down some trails, and rough trails. We've had a lot of rain here, so it was a little bit washed out and rutted and rough, and then we'd driven quite a distance, her on my machine, mine on hers, and I will tell you, the thing I noticed is certain aspects of the ride are very similar. But there are some aspects that the Scrambler just blows it away. So cornering, you would think this big wide machine is not going to corner as well as this one does, and not be as sporty because it's bigger, it's heavier. That bigger, heavier, wider machine handles more sporty. I ride primarily sport quads. I have my whole life, and I am more comfortable riding in that fashion, sliding the rear end out, sliding through turns on that Scrambler than on the Renegade. The Renegade is very tippy in those circumstances. Now, a lot of that could have to do with the tire setup, with these skinny tires in the front and the front being a little bit narrower due to that, and these big round balloon tires in the back. That's gonna affect the handling characteristics. Now we plan on doing is widening this machine a little bit with a little bit of an offset wheel, the same offset front and rear, and running the same size tires front and rear. And then when we do that, we'll kind of compare how much that changes that feeling of the machine, and if it still feels tippy when you're sliding the rear end out. If you want to ride sporty and you get doing some get on a berm and you want to, give it the gas and kick the rear end out and slide the rear end around a turn. The Can-Am, you feel like you're going to end up on two wheels or tip over, whereas the Scrambler, you don't even need to put any body weight. I mean, actually, to be honest with you, leaning into the turn on the Scrambler has zero effect. You're just kind of along for the ride. It's so big and so heavy and so wide that you just flip the throttle and cut the wheel a little bit, and it just slides. It just goes, and it does what you want it to do, and it's very confidence inspiring and very comfortable doing it. Not once have I ever felt where this machine has gotten tippy on me, where this machine, you really got to watch it driving in that manner, because it does tend to feel that way at times. So now, that being said, if you like to drive in that way, or you're not as inexperienced of a rider, I would suggest the Scrambler, because I think you need a little bit more driver input and body positioning on the Renegade than you do on the Scrambler, just because of the width and the handling characteristics. Now, that's a little bit of a battle for me here personally on this channel, because my wife is not as experienced of a rider as I am. So when I'm out with her, I'm very conscious of the terrain I'm going over and what line I choose so that she can follow the line I take, and she's comfortable. She's come a long way. She's never had an ATV before, and I will tell you, I applaud my wife. Smash the thumbs up button for her here, because she has never had an ATV in her life. She's a Queens, New York girl, grew up on blacktop. I'm from New York too, but she grew up in a city, never was around this stuff her whole life until she met me, and we've been together for over 20 years. I've always had ATVs, but she never had one of her own. She just recently, she got a Renegade 570 about, a little over 2 years ago, and then upgraded to this Renegade 1000 because she wanted the suspension, better suspension. And she has come such a long way in her drivability and her abilities. She's gone to the dunes with me, and she's duned that machine. She doesn't do nothing crazy, but she does do it. So you can learn. And one thing with the Can-Am, it's very intimidating for new riders, but the good thing is, and my wife started out this way, there is 3 power modes. So power on the Can-Am versus the Scrambler is abundantly different. It's the Can-Am Renegade has 3 power modes, so I'll show you. So you have this switch up here. It's called Intelligent Throttle Control, ITC switch. Now, you be in standard mode. If you push the switch over and let go, it's going to go into eco mode. Okay, if you go back over to the right and let go, it'll be back into normal or standard mode. And if you click it over to the right one more time, it's going to beep, and it's going to let you know you've just engaged insane mode. So it'll go, if you all the way the furthest to the right is sport mode. Sport mode on the Renegade is absolutely tear your forearms off. It's crazy. Bottom end, it's like nothing you've ever driven, and if can be very intimidating for a non-experienced rider, and dangerous, I would say, because if you're got a lot of machismo, you're a guy and you think, hey, I can handle anything because I'm a dude, and even though you have no experience riding, and you get on this thing and just flip it into sport mode and start hammering on it, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to be on your ass in about 20 minutes. You have to respect the machine and respect the power of this thing. My wife started out with this machine when she got this 1000. 570 wasn't really that big a deal. It was moderate power. It was good for her. It did everything she needed. So when she got to the 1000, she started off driving that machine, and I had the Renegade as well at the same time. We both had Renegade 1000s. And I would just drive around in sport mode. But she would leave it in eco mode. Now that she's had it for a long time and she's been put 500 and something miles on it, she's comfortable in standard mode, and that's what she'll leave it in for pretty much everything, unless we're like parking it on the trailer or pulling it in the garage. Here we'll put it down to eco mode, because when you get it on the blacktop or in the garage here where we kind of have a lot of ATVs, as you can see. So we got to back them up against the wall and get them put away nice and neat so we can get the cars in here. And you pull in the garage, you got a little bit of room to work with. You back up forward to get it park it. So she puts it in, we'll put it in eco mode, something like that. Even with that unit, we'll get into that, it has a couple of power modes also, because anything other than eco mode, it's very sensitive to throttles. A lot of bottom end. A lot of it is in the clutching, I think, and besides the throttle mapping, the clutching is very aggressive, with them both being automatic transmissions and CVTs, where they use a belt and there's no shifting, no manually shifting gears. The clutching on this is much more aggressive. Bottom end, it hits hard. Whereas getting over into the Scrambler, and the power on the Scrambler, you have 2 modes, and it's a normal switch. It's just and it says right on there, standard and performance mode. Now, I have found full power in both modes. It's just really how the power comes on. And similarly with the Renegade, eco mode is very tame, really tames it down a lot. But if you have it in standard mode, you can get full power when you pin throttle. You're going to get full power. Sport mode, just makes it so that it's much more instant power and not as linear, and it's a lot more on the bottom right off the throttle tip, and as soon as you hit the throttle. And it's very similar situation with the Scrambler. When you just go from standard and performance mode, you both get full power, but when you go to performance mode, you're just getting it a lot sooner on the throttle engagement. And speaking of throttle engagement, I will say this throttle is a little stiffer than the throttle on the Renegade. It's like, I mean, you feel how soft that, hear how, I mean, you hear it coming back sitting there, but it's very soft. It's super, super easy. I mean, you know, and that's one of the things I think what makes it difficult to ride in sport mode if you're going slow or something like that. And why eco mode is nice is because the throttle is so soft and easy. When you're on bumpy terrain, your thumb tends to kind of bounce on the throttle, whereas there's a little more resistance on the throttle on the Scrambler. Your thumb's going to get maybe a little more tired from a long trail ride, but there's a little more resistance here. It more feels like a throttle where you have a traditional throttle cable, like say on a sport quad, where you have a throttle cable connected to it, where it's not just electronic. Even though this is an electronic throttle, it's drive-by-wire, same as the Renegade. The throttle has the feel of a throttle, as if it has a throttle cable, if you know what I mean, like your traditional throttle, not a drive-by-wire system. So those are two drastic differences between the two machines. Top end speed, they're both pretty close to the same. You're going to hit, you know, about almost 80 miles an hour on this, and you can hit 80 miles per hour on this one. I haven't checked the top speed on these, but I have seen plenty of people do it so far. I can do that for you in a future video. We can do, we'll drag race them, and we'll show you the top speed of both. I know this machine will hit 80 miles an hour, and this machine will just about 80 miles an hour. Why you'd want to go that fast on an ATV at that speed, it's really, you know, it's kind of squirrely, and if you crash, you know, you're a goner. So most people don't drive that fast. Top speed is not really a big thing for me. Most of my riding is at, you know, 30, 40 miles an hour, and then we get into some technical trails, and you're riding, you know, 10, 15 miles an hour on those, so maybe sometimes slower. So suspension, power, drastically different. This machine's way more comfortable. That machine's stiffer. It doesn't take the big hits as good as this machine does. And, you know, if you're just reading the numbers, that's to be expected. This machine here has 9.9 inches of rear suspension travel, and front suspension travel, it's a little bit less. You're looking at 9.2 inches of travel on the front of the Renegade, whereas on the Scrambler, you got 12.5 inches of front suspension travel and 14 inches of rear suspension travel. So those big hits, those big G-outs, you don't even feel them on here. And that was one of the things that when me and my wife switched machines, and, you know, she's not as experienced of a rider as I am. She hasn't ridden a lot of machines. She's really only got experience on the Renegades, the 570, and now this one. And she drove my Grizzly for like a couple minutes, like nothing crazy. But she don't have a lot of experience in anything else. So after getting off mine, the biggest thing she noticed was, she said it feels way more stable. She felt, you know, being used to hers, she felt the throttle was stiff on her thumb. She felt that. And she didn't say that the big, you know, ruts and stuff like that, where normally you would, in your mind, you see something like that coming on the trail, you brace or you slow down. On the Scrambler, it just eats it up, and you don't even really, it doesn't even rattle you at all. It's really another level of suspension for an ATV. There's nothing else that compares. If you're comparing two machines for purely suspension alone, you want the best suspension, Scrambler's the winner. There's nothing that comes close to it. It just, there isn't anything. You know, you're looking at the specs on the paper, and it translates to real world. This thing handles, lands, jumps 10 times smoother than the Renegade does. Now, that's not saying the Renegade handles bad. It doesn't. The Renegade handles better at higher speeds. And that's just the way the suspension is tuned, I believe. That was the reason why I got rid of my Renegade. Because I got the 4x4 machine to not have to drive it like the Raptor. Okay, if I want to ride fast and rip, and that's the only way I'm going to ride. I have my Raptor 700 for that. If I want to take these machines out and I want to do long, we go out to the mountains and we do long rides, 90, 100 miles sometimes. Just this past Sunday, we did about 50 miles, close to 50 miles. And that was an easy day for us. We regularly go out for the day on a Sunday or a Saturday and hit close to 100 miles on these machines. So I want something. I'm not a young guy anymore. I'm 46 and a half, so my body feels older than that. And I have a, bad lower back. And I wanted something where I can go out on these rides. You get into the rough stuff, the technical trail riding, and you just don't get beat up. I can ride the Scrambler all day long, and I don't feel beat up. I mean, you don't feel it. The terrain does not translate through your body like it does on some other machines. Now, on the Renegade, if you're going fast and you're going over some rough terrain, it eats it up a lot better. If you're going slow, technical, rough terrain, that's where this machine has not as good as this. That's where you can feel the difference in the suspension. This machine here handles the slow technical stuff just as smooth and just as good as it does the high-speed rough stuff, where this machine handles the higher speed rough stuff good. Still not as good as the Scrambler, but very good, holds its own. But on the slower technical stuff, it's very stiff. That's where you notice the difference between the two. And when you get into these technical rough trails and you're on them all day, you do tend to be a little bit more beat up all day on the Can-Am. And that was one thing I was disappointed on. I figured with the full adjustability of the shocks, and I can get them set to where I'm very comfortable and I can ride it all day, and I feel that way at the end of the day. And that's why I ended up ultimately getting rid of the Renegade. You don't know these things till you drive them. So hopefully this video here is helping you guys make that decision for you as to what you're looking for. You don't have to do what I did and buy one, sell it, lose a couple dollars, and move up to a different machine. It is drastic in that regard. In terms of seat comfort, handlebar, seat positioning, I think that's a lot of personal preference. I will tell you my opinion. I like the seating position on both, and I say that, but they're both very different. So I'll hop on my wife's Renegade here and I'll kind of show you. You're sitting here on the machine, and my arms are about, fairly straight out. The bar here is about belly button height. The bar pad is about belly button height for me, and my arms are fairly straight out. My legs. You have nice pegs on this machine. We'll get into that in a minute on the Renegade. Single lever braking, stuff like that. It's very similar on both. Then over here you get on the Scrambler, and you'll see, arms are a little bit of a bend to them, not quite as straight out, and the handlebars are about the bottom of my chest. So you sit down in this machine, you feel, even though you're sitting higher on the Scrambler, you feel like you sit down into it more, in my opinion. The bars come up higher, and that's that 3-inch riser they had on these. The bars come up higher. They come in closer to you. You feel like you have a lot more control. You don't have to reach. That's a lot more of a sporty, kind of an attack position, kind of a sport quad feel, which that's not what I was looking for on a 4x4 ATV, and that's why I like this one better for me. My wife loves her Renegade. Even if she didn't, she probably wouldn't say it because she's not like me. She doesn't want to waste the money, and she wouldn't switch. She'll just keep that one. It's fine for her. So, but I will tell you, that's a lot of personal preference. Seat, I like the seat better on the Scrambler. It's narrower. You can see here from the top, it's narrower. The Renegade is very wide between the knees. And you can see it that way there. It's very wide between the knees, and it's just the way the motors are positioned and how they have to build them. The motor and the transmission is side by side here on the Renegade, where on the Scrambler, the transmission and the motor is longitudinally. So it's, you know, the length goes with the length of the machine. So they're able to make the midsection narrower. So between your knees, it's narrower there. It's where your knees are. And you feel that, and it just makes for more comfort. The seat, both seats are very soft. Different material, for sure. This seat is kind of soft. It doesn't saddle you in as much. It's premium feeling though. This seat here, it's a little softer. And then you got the little hump on the back. I find if I'm riding really aggressive, I can sit up tighter towards the front of the seat. And then if I'm kind of cruising down a long fire road or a long trail, I can sit back further on the seat, almost back to here, close to the hump. And the seat actually gets a little softer towards the rear even. And you can sit on the machine in different ways. I like the seating better on the Scrambler. The Renegade here has a beautiful set of pegs, nice high rise, high grip metal pegs that Can-Am gives you. So kudos to them for that. The Scrambler here, I mean, it's junk. Those floorboards are horrible. If you're wearing riding boots, there's zero traction. If you're wearing sneakers, regular work boots, something like that, I do tend to wear my riding boots on a long ride for a multitude of reasons. But there's no grip with the riding boots. I found out just this weekend on these. So I will be adding a set of metal foot pegs here. You can get a set aftermarket ones to bolt on right here. And I put them right before here, right before the factory plastic ones, which I don't even know why I don't know why they can't give you a set of metal pegs. Even the Grizzly I had, Grizzly owners complained about the pegs on that machine, but at least they were metal and they rose up a little bit, and you had some grip. Where this is just plastic. It's fine if you have, you know, like I'm wearing sneakers right now. You can hear it, you know, gripping. But if you're wearing a set of hard riding boots, there's no grip there on that footboard. And if you get it packed with mud or dirt, there's going to be nothing there. So you got a huge, big high-rise peg there with some side bite on them. So that's the big plus for the Can-Am. As far as maintenance, that's a big thing. If you like to do your own maintenance, I will tell you, the Can-Am, absolute nightmare, maintenance-wise. I know there's going to be some Can-Am fanboys come on here, and I'm not knocking the Can-Am, but you know, you all know, don't tell me I'm lying, that changing fluids on this thing is not an absolute disaster. For one, the drain bolts, the positioning of them, I have a whole video out on this, so I'm not going to go crazy, but prime example, the drain bolt on the rear diff for the Can-Am is a tiny little Allen head screw on the side right there. Now you can see how tight it is right there. When you take that screw out, it is, when I say tiny, I mean it's tiny. The fluid trickles out of that hole forever for it to get it all out. You got to tilt the machine with a jack on that side, on the right side up, to get all the fluid to drain out. And then once it's done draining, put a couple pumps of fresh fluid through the fill hole, just because it doesn't flow out at fast enough rate to get all the dirt and the stuff out of and the old oil out, and just to flush it out, you know, you got to put a couple pumps of clean oil through there. And then there's the frame, between the frame rails, there's a flat metal plate. I have the Can-Am skid plate on here as well, but even without that, there's no drain, there's no hole in the frame underneath for that oil to come out. So what happens is it just trickles out of that hole, it hits the frame, the plate on the frame, and it just runs to the front and to the back, and it just falls out. You got to put a big, huge pan under there, and it just falls out everywhere. It's a disaster. It's a super big mess. And then when your engine oil and transmission fluid, and the engine oil is not as bad. Your oil filter's right there. You take the cap off, you're gonna get a little oil spillage, similar to, you know, a sport quad situation. And then the oil fills right here. The transmission, you can take this cover off. It's back there. There's a white plug down there. You can see it where my finger's pointing. You got to pump the fluid into that. Again, a little bit of a mess draining it. Front diff's not as bad. On the Scrambler, piece of cake. You have, like a normal human being, design this. You have a drain bolt on the bottom. right there. Pull the drain bolt out, oil comes out straight down into a drain pan. Why do we got to deal with that mess on Can-Am to change fluids? It's absolutely, it's silly. Whoever thought of that design needs to have their head examined, because it's stupid. There's not even a reason for it. It doesn't make any sense. Put a drain bolt on the bottom of it. The fluid comes out better. There's less mess. It's faster. It's easier. And then the fill, again, right there. You know, it's just easy. Same thing with the oil. You know, on the bottom, there's a plate you take off right there. Right by the skid plate. It's that metal plate you take off. You take that off. The drain bolt for the bottom of the motor is right there. And the oil filter is right next to it. A regular oil filter, like screw-on type oil filter, right next to it. Take it off. Everything goes right into the pan. No mess. Screw an oil filter in. Put your drain bolt back in. Fill it with oil. Piece of cake. Transmission, same thing. There's your fill, and the drain's right over there next to it. There's a hole underneath on the frame. The oil is going to run out. Easy to get to. Easy to get to the front diff. Where the Can-Am is a little easy to work on, the belt. So if you got to change your belt out on the trail, either machine, it's not going to be fun. But on the Can-Am, you can, and I have gotten the clutch cover off without taking the footwell off. I suggest you take the footwell off. It makes it a lot easier. It's basically just, 1, 2, 3, 4 10mm bolts, and then you have 2 screws on each side, and this whole footwell comes off. Then you can take all the bolts off for your clutch cover, take it off, and your clutches are right there. You can clean them, take the belt off, call it a day. Now, this is where the layout of the engine front to back and the transmission front to back, as opposed to side by side on the Renegade, where that makes it wider and a little less comfortable. It's easier to work on your transmission and your clutches. Where on the Polaris, the clutches face the rear. So now you can see the clutch cover. It seems like it's pretty easy to get to, right? And it is for the most part. The bolts are fairly easy to get to. The problem lies when you want to get that clutch cover completely off. You can see right away that frame getting that clutch cover past the clutches, and then the clutch cover off and out. It's going to hit the frame. So Polaris designed this section of the frame to be removable. So you take those 4 bolts out. This piece of the frame comes off, and then your clutch cover can slide out. So again, maintenance is key here. You don't want to be blowing a belt out on the trail, because on either machine it's not going to be fun to change on the trail. And probably less so. You're going to have to carry more tools for the Polaris, because you have to take those the frame bolts off, and then you're going to want to make sure you put them back on and torque them to spec. They're bolts for the frame, so you want to make sure you torque them. Don't just go 2 or 3 Ergonomics and say, good enough. They're frame bolts. It's the chassis. So everything else, air filter wise, I don't know. Air filter is a little easier to access, I would say, on the Scrambler 2. The seat pops off, and there's your air filters right there. There's your cover. Whereas on the Renegade, you can see where the air filter is underneath there. But this whole hood's got to come off on the Renegade to get to your air filter. So this pops up. There's just some rubber tension there. It's pretty tight that they're in there. You yank up on this, and then you pull them out. There's also clips in the front. You pull them out there, and then the whole hood slides to the rear and comes off, and then that's a whole fiasco, sliding the whole hood back up over the shifter, not scratch the paint on the bottom of the bars. It's a little bit cumbersome getting the hood off and on. And I don't know why, again, they made it that difficult. I don't know why you couldn't have made that open back there, or have some type of system where that's accessible to get to the air filter. The air filter is something you're supposed to check regularly. To make it that difficult to get to your air filter, I think is kind of stupid. But again, it just gets back to what I was saying. I think the maintenance on the Polaris is easier. The seat does have a latch on the Can-Am. There's a latch there. You feel it. You can hear me. You hear me have it with my thumb. Whereas the Polaris, there's no latch on the seat. It just goes into the front. And it's held in by pressure, similar to like a Yamaha Grizzly or something like that. And it's in. That's that. Fit and finish, I don't know. It's kind of a crapshoot. Which one's better? There is a couple seams on the Renegade that's a little weird. I'm sure it was designed that way, but people say it gets worse over time with heat, and that's another thing we'll talk about here. I think fit and finish is pretty good on both. The only issue with fit and finish, I would say, I don't know if it's necessarily fit and finish, but the way that big gap there under the seat, I don't know. It just seems like unfinished to me. You can fit your whole hand in there. So that's a little weird why it's designed that way. And people have said that that tends to get worse over time just from the heat of the exhaust. It gets so hot. This machine runs extremely hot. And so then the plastic ends up actually warping a little bit. My wife's got these here on there, these fender brackets from Checo Racing, and they help the fenders from flopping around and make them a little more rigid, right there. So that helps. But you have this warpage here, and that's from the heat, from the exhaust, which is weird because most of the heat on this machine is actually on the right side. You feel it, but the way the pipe sweeps around and goes to the muffler right here, I guess it runs kind of close to the plastic and kind of heats the plastic up and warps them a little bit there. When you ride this machine, that was the other thing I noticed riding back to back. Everybody on the Renegade forums and the Renegade Facebook page, anybody who owns a Renegade knows they get extremely hot and they run extremely hot. And it's not even so much that they run hot. You feel the heat. For whatever reason, the heat is just crazy on your legs. So if you're not wearing, my wife wears, she's got a set of Alpine Star riding boots that I had bought her when she got her last machine. That she rides with those. And because if she doesn't, and if you don't, you're basically, if you're riding and your leg with, you're definitely not wearing shorts. I can tell you that right now. But if you don't have boots on or something, some type of thick pants or something to protect your leg here, the heat that emanates from this area of the machine, not on the left side, you don't have that problem. It's just this side. No joke, your calf will be raw, like you just like it was roasting in an oven all day. Your calf is probably cooked like one of those roast turkey legs at the county fair. That's what your leg's going to feel like all day on the Can-Am, where when you get on the Polaris, there's none of that. There's zero heat at all. You feel nothing. And if you don't believe me, hop on one back to back and you'll feel the difference. There's no heat that comes off here, even though right behind this panel is the exhaust header. And if you want to see what that looks like with the panel off, check out the video we have where we put an exhaust system on. My brother has the same Scrambler. We put an exhaust system on that. We have the panels off. And you can see the factory pipe runs back through there. But you see that gigantic heat shield on the other side of the plastic. And it does its job. It just deflects. When you take this black panel off, the other side is a thick metal heat shield. And insulation and stuff, and it really does its job. You don't feel any heat transfer through to your leg. You feel no heat whatsoever. So it really does its job. Makes it more comfortable to ride in that regard. 2, stock for stock, temperature-wise, I was kind of keeping an eye on the temperature running. Now, keep in mind, we're here in Arizona, and we went out Sunday, and I was paying attention to the 2. It was about 90 degrees, 95 degrees out. So both machines would get up to about 205. The Renegade gets up to like maybe 206, 207. It'll stay there for a minute or two before it slowly starts to come back down, and it'll drop down to about 195. The Scrambler tends to hit the 205 and then instantly drop right down, and it'll drop all the way as far as down to like 193, 195. Stay down there for a bit. It'll slowly creep back up. Fan will kick on. Thermostat will open, and everything will cool back off really fast. It's a much slower process of it cooling off on the Renegade, and it tends to run maybe a degree or two warmer, but Peak temperature is about the same. It's just that you feel the heat there here on this machine a lot, as opposed to this one. The big fix is, obviously, people say a freer flowing exhaust and a tune to make it run a little cooler drastically helps. You can also wrap the pipe, wrap the exhaust. I don't know what but with the exhaust pipe being on the left side, I'm not sure why it gets so hot on this right side here. It could just be the engine's so exposed and the heat coming off the engine right there. It's just hot, or the rear of the header, coming off right there, blowing out. The heat on your leg, I don't know, but this right side is extremely hot on these machines. In terms of like anything going wrong on the machines, this one's got 500 some odd miles on it. We haven't had any problems with it. It's got some squeaks, but it's a Can-Am. Can-Am's are squeaky. Polaris can be a little squeaky too. So it's got some squeaks. We grease it, they go away. After a ride, they come right back. So it's something you got to live with. There are some upgraded bushings out there on the market, suspension bushings you can upgrade to, which may or may not help. I don't have first-hand experience with that, so I can't tell you. Kind of comparing these machines stock for stock right now, and I want to this way you guys know what you're getting, what to look for, what to consider when making your purchase. As you can see, they both come with hand guards. They both have hand guards on them, and that's how they both come. So if you get the XXC Renegade, you're going to get a set of hand guards, and if you get the Scrambler, you're going to get the Polaris hand guards. I will give that another one up on the Renegade. Wins this one for the hand guards. It's a better quality hand guard. Sorry, Polaris, but the hand guards here are full wraparound with the metal wraparound that bolt to the end of the handlebars. And I can tell you already, this has already saved my wife. When I had mentioned earlier in the video how she had a kind of a slow rollover. You can see the mark here. The bars kind of hit the ground right here. She came off the machine. And again, that's another reason why it's good to wear your boots. The machine kind of landed on her ankle. She had her boots on. So she was pinned under it. Her legs were pinned under it. And then this bar came over. She was kind of holding it up here. Right, this was kind of on her chest, and she was holding it up from here. So, where on this machine you have these, they're solid. I mean, but if you tip the machine over, if you roll it, I mean, you're going to do a lot of damage. That you roll a 1,000-pound machine, but these are going to just snap. Or if you hit a big branch, these are going to break. There's nothing here to support the ends. I like a nice wraparound handguard. Those are nicer than these are, but they do the job, and it's nice that they include them. Downside of these ones are the adjustability wise. The mount for the handguard is on this side. It's part of the throttle. So if you loosen the screws and pivot the handguard up or down, if you want it different, there's a little bit of adjustment here. But if you want to move the overall position of them, you're also moving the throttle. And likewise on the other side, you're also going to be moving the brake assembly, because it's mounted, it's the top clamp for your brake master cylinder. So it kind of limits the adjustability. Both machines' braking are very similar. You'll see here on the rear, you have disc brakes, and then in the front you have the same disc brakes and disc brakes. So you have 4 wheels with their own disc brakes on the Scrambler. On the Renegade, you don't get that. You get the front wheels both have their own disc brake, and in the rear you only get one. So on the rear, on the left side, there is no disc brake. On the right side, you have the disc brake. So you get 1 disc brake in the rear, 2 in the front. With the Renegade, and the Scrambler, you get 4-wheel discs. Each wheel gets its own braking. Does it help with stopping power? I don't know. I don't notice one being able to stop better than the other. And then similarly, they both have a single lever braking system. So if you pull this lever, it's going to operate the front brakes and the rear brakes together. And the same thing with the Renegade. Single lever. Here in the United States anyway. If you're in Europe, Europe gets dual levers. They get a lever on the right side and the left side to operate the front and the rear independently. I don't know why, but they do. The European models are much different than the North American models. You also get a little lever here to lock the brakes. Pull them in hard enough and put that up. Give you a parking brake. Same thing on the Polaris, same setup, and you can put both transmissions, have a park as well. The lever here is not really single-handed operated, you need two hands. Pull it in and then push that lever forward in the front there, right here, and lock it in. Shifting is, I'll give that to the Can-Am as well, when it's running anyway. That's a weird thing. Get into that in a minute. But you have park, reverse, neutral, low, and high. And then here on the, like most Polarises, even the side-by-sides, it's just straight up, straight back. So you got boom, 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 and it's very hard. The shifting, I would say, you know, if you're just going from park to high, kind of ram it all the way up. When you want to find reverse, it's a little bit cumbersome. Finding that reverse notch for some reason, it seems to be difficult. I've many times gone down to neutral, down to park. If you go from park to reverse, it's hard. You got to kind of go up to neutral and then back down again. Over here on the Renegade, much easier to shift. You have a nice gated shifter. It's much easier while the machine is running to find reverse, neutral, high, and low, and going back and forth between them. It's very smooth and fluent. When you put it in park, sometimes you got to rock the machine to get it to lock into park. But I find that to be the same problem on the Scrambler. I put it back into park. Sometimes you got to rock the machine a little bit, and then it'll pop into park. I don't know if it's a cable adjustment. I've tried fiddling around with those on the Renegade. It doesn't seem to help much. The Renegade is weird though. If it's not running, you're not shifting. Like the shifter isn't moving. The clutches need to be spinning on the Renegade for the shifter to be smooth and operational. So keep that in mind. If you're going to park it and want to move it around, what I tend to do is when I leave them in the garage, I leave it in neutral. So if I want to pull it out, I can just kind of roll it out, roll it back without having to, you know, fiddle and struggle with the shifter getting it into neutral while it's not running. Other than that, there's some similar things too. You get a 12-volt outlet here on the Renegade. You get that on the Scrambler also. It's just in a different spot. And it's right here. With the Scrambler, it starts with the key. So you turn the key forward and just turn the key like you would be starting an automobile that uses a key. You just turn the key to start it. With the Renegade, you get this electronically coded key. So if that key's not there, you can't even hotwire this machine. It senses the chip and the programming in it, or the machine won't start. So that's kind of a plus, kind of like an anti-theft deterrent. You do get three different modes for your power steering: high input, low input, medium input. Same thing on that. It's easier to change on the Renegade. You just got to hit this button, hold, hit the button, hold, and it'll change on the screen. Minimum, maximum, medium. And with the Scrambler, you got to get into the menu, go through the menu to change it, and then, you know, it's not as easy. It would be nice if it was just done by the button the way it is on the Renegade. That would make it much easier. That's a win for the Renegade. So that was also a big difference my wife and I noticed driving the two machines back to back, and she noticed she did not like the power steering on the Scrambler. She preferred the power steering on hers. She said that the Scrambler felt too twitchy and too much power steering, where it was too sensitive for her. I like it, but you can run the power steering on the low setting on the Scrambler, and it's still more input than the medium setting, which is what my wife runs her Renegade at. So that's something to consider too, power steering feel. You don't get, other than the way you see them here, they don't, you know, this is pretty much the way they come. The only thing we haven't added anything to the Scrambler. The Renegade comes with a center skid plate and just plastic in the front and nothing in the rear. We've just got the Can-Am one for the front to continue all the way through, and then the Can-Am one for the back. You can get the ones that go under the footwells, and I would recommend doing those. We've bottomed them out a little bit. The bottom of those footwells are just solid plastic, same as the Polaris, but the Polaris you have more ground clearance. So if you're going to go with a full skid plate, get something that comes out underneath the footwells as well, specifically on the Renegade, I would say, because they're more prone to bottoming out, hitting something there, just because you don't have the ground clearance. But, you know, they're both great machines, and you really can't go wrong with either one. I got a tip, me personally, for the way I like to ride. I keep this thing in performance mode the whole time, and you can modulate the throttle enough, even in performance mode, to just leave it in that all day. If you're an experienced rider, you can leave it in performance mode and get away with that on all terrain types with the Scrambler, where with the Renegade, you are going to be going back and forth between them because you can't just keep it in sport mode. If you're in the rough terrain, especially with the suspension not being as compliant, you're going to tend to bounce around a lot on the rocks and the stuff like that. You're going to want to maybe drop it down into standard or eco mode even. But it's a flip of a switch. It's not difficult. There's nothing that I would say should deter you from getting either machine. They're just two totally different drive feels. Again, straight line, rocket ship, Renegade's got it. Comfort, rough terrain, jumping, smoothness, suspension travel, Scrambler's got it beat. Those are just by the numbers and me telling you. I'm going to show you guys in future videos. We'll take them out on the trail. We'll jump one over the other, see how they land, give you the feedback from being on each machine, what it feels like. And, you know, we'll drag race and we'll do top speed runs. We'll see how they hold up long term. If one of them, you know, has issues and the other one doesn't. Obviously, we've had this one longer, so it's going to be a while. We've had this one only a month. It's got a little over 100 miles on it now, not even at the break-in phase yet. I haven't even pinned the throttle on that thing yet. I don't think I've gone more than half or maybe 3/4 of the throttle quick on that. They're very fast. They're both very fast and very powerful machines, and you're going to be more than happy with that on either one. As far as one more thing I want to touch on before we close out this video, I know it's a long one, but I want to give you guys as much information as possible here on the initial walk-around overviews of the two in comparison. If you're going to do any work with these machines, I kind of touched on it briefly, but neither one of these machines come with a hitch. You can add a hitch to either machine. The Renegade Can-Am has it rated at 1,300 pounds. You put it in low gear, and you can haul 1,300 pounds if you put a hitch on it. Polaris does not rate the Scrambler at all. There's no tow rating, but the Scrambler is the same chassis and drivetrain as the Sportsman 1000 XP S, 55 inches wide, same chassis, it's the same frame, same everything, and that one's rated to tow 1750, so 1,750. This is rated to tow 1,300. So if you get the hitch receiver and put it on the Scrambler, you're going to at least be able to tow what the Renegade can. And most likely up to, you know, 1,700 pounds like the Sportsman does. It's the same chassis. There's really no difference in them in that regard. So you should be able to tow the same if you get the hitch receiver that's on the Sportsman. Put it on here, it just bolts right into the back. Same way with the Renegade. I do little work in the yard with the Renegade. I drag my property, and then the hitch receiver just bolts right back here. And then on the Renegade, it's just a little different. It comes with this plate here. I drag the yard. I have a drag. It's like a cheap one with a chain link fence and 2 bars. You put some cinder blocks on. I have like 1.25 acres, so I drag the yard once in a while. I'll use this machine and just hook it right here and drag the yard with it. Works fine. But you can get the hitch receiver for this, and these 2 bolts come out that go through the rear diff. And this piece comes off, and then the hitch receiver goes on, and bolts go back through, and that's how that attaches on this one. Super easy. One thing with the Renegade, Can-Am sells a license plate bracket that just bolts right to the frame here, right in that spot. Polaris sells nothing for a license plate. I have it zip tied right now, but I have one here that we made. I didn't make it. I can't take credit. My brother has a Scrambler. He made one for his. Where is it? It's right here. My brother made one for his Scrambler. It's going to go in the back here. And then mount the plate right to that. And it's just going to go right up here to those holes there. So there's already pre-threaded holes here where the bumper will go for the on the Sportsman. And then they're just open here because the bumper is different on the, you just have a grab bar on the Scrambler. So those holes are just left there and they're threaded. You just get the bolts and we can attach that and mount our license plate. So that's how we'll do that. So we get rid of the whole zip tie thing. It's just kind of threw that on there temporary. And that pretty much wraps this one up. I think we covered just about everything. I don't think there's anything we didn't touch. The video's been very long. Again, as you see these machines is how they came, with the exception of, well, the Scrambler 100%. That's the way it comes out of the box. The Can-Am, the only thing we changed is the coloring. You know, they're both premium. That's another thing too. The color kind of reminded me. And they both represent the Odyssey Off-Road there, just in different ways. But both premium painted plastics. They say premium. In my opinion, the painted plastics on an ATV looks great, but they scratch. You know, this is painted gray, painted blue. We just changed the graphics. My wife wanted to go with the hot pink, so we got rid of all the orange and all that stuff and switched everything over to either black or hot pink. And we had TNT kits make the graphics that look factory, but they're hot pink instead of orange. And she's got her little touches on the back. And then we added the rough country rack. Other than that, this machine is bone stock. Bone stock, bone stock. So comparing them this way, you know, I'm not taking one machine that's got some mods and over the other. And this is apples to apples. You know, out of the box, how they compare, what they are, the differences I notice. So hope this video was helpful for some of you guys. If I touched on some key points that, you know, was on your mind in making your determination, hopefully it was helpful. Leave a comment below, start a discussion. Which one machine do you like better? Which machine do you own? Which machine do you regret your purchase? Let's start a conversation below. I'd love to interact with you guys. So leave a comment and I'll respond. Smash the thumbs up button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and follow us on Instagram at Odyssey_Offroad. And you can also follow us. We started a Facebook page, Odyssey Off-Road on Facebook. Both the links to the Instagram and the Facebook will be in the video description below. Again, this is Joe with Odyssey Off-Road, guys. We will see you on the next one.